Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the weekly POV. I am Josh, and I'm glad to be here with you once again. On today's show, I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on The Mandalorian, Chapter 18, The Mines of Mandalore. I'm also going to be breaking down the Academy Award winners from last night and reviewing The Last of Us Season 1 finale as well. Again, so glad that you could be here. I want to get into, what I've been up to, what I've been watching, and some of my recommendations before we dive into the other topics that I mentioned. I recently, over the weekend, finished Cobra Kai season 5. It took me a while to get around to that one. But I want to say I thought this was another very strong season. I really love this show. Johnny Lawrence has become my favorite character. I think he's been my favorite character for a long time, but even seeing, because just he cracks me up. I mean, he's hilarious to me. I love the humor there, and just his character arc too. I mean, he's definitely changed a bit throughout the course of the show, but I felt like this season really brought the amount of danger to a whole new level, especially in the finale of season 5. I felt like I thought like everybody was going to die in that episode. Like I was like, oh my god, like it was just kind of crazy, and it definitely took things to another level, and I'm really excited to see the last season of the show and what ends up happening with that. I also finished watching Dahmer starring Evan Peters, and I think, like I said before, it's definitely not a show for everybody, and it's not for the faint of heart, and it gets pretty gruesome and hard to watch at times. But I think I think Evan Peters was tremendous in it. I think they did an excellent job of showing what happened, and kind of honoring the victims and everything, especially towards the end, because in real life, I guess if the show is, and at the end of the show, they basically said that there was supposed to be a memorial or a park built, um, honoring the victims where the apartment complex was, where Jeff Dahmer lived and everything, but that never occurred. So maybe this show is a way to kind of honor the victims and remember them and everything. But it's also just a deep dive into how upbringing and parenting and or lack thereof, and exposure to dead animals and stuff like that, and all these things that may have made Jeff Dahmer tick, or may have like led to some of the things that he did. For me, being a psychology major, it was very interesting for me to dive into this. I'm interested in true crime, and um, particularly like serial killers, just trying to get like into, well, how does this happen? How could somebody do these things? Because of course I couldn't imagine doing anything like that. But I definitely recommend Dahmer for those that want to dive deeper into that whole thing. I didn't actually know what ended up happening with Jeffrey Dahmer until watching this. I'd heard of him, and everything. There's even this link to John Wayne Gacy in the last episode too, that kind of links those two together. But yeah, I never really looked too much into it, and watching this show answered some questions for me. So yeah, if you have the stomach for it, check out Dahmer as well on Netflix. And now I'm going to talk about the Mandalorian, chapter 18, the Mines of Mandalore. I know there were some people who had some complaints out there, at least on Twitter, where there's a lot of complaints, but I don't know about the general population and their thoughts. I enjoyed chapter 17, but I know there were people that had some complaints about that not being what they wanted it to be. I thought chapter 18 was really good. There were a lot of things I really enjoyed about it. We got to go back to Tatooine again and see like Bunta Eve happening, and races going on in Tatooine, and Pelimato kind of trying to swindle somebody into giving her money for parts to a speeder that I think her droids had actually taken in the first place, and trying to stir up business that way. Um, but we also got to see R5 from A New Hope again, and again, Peli Motto, being who she is, convinced Mando to take R5 with him to Mandalore, he needs a droid to basically test the atmosphere and see if it's breathable and everything. Um, and she pawns R5 off onto him because he can't. She doesn't have the part he needs to fix IG-11 and everything. But anyway, we head to Mandalore, and it was great to see that in live action and on screen. I've seen Mandalore and the Clone Wars and Rebels and everything, but it was cool to see it in a ruined state. And Mandalore tells Grogu that he actually grew up on Concordia and everything, which is a moon of Mandalore and a place that we visited before in animation as well. I thought Grogu's cuteness went to a whole nother level in this episode. I was just like, I was loving all of it. And I feel like he's getting closer to speaking. We need some words out of Grogu soon. I want to hear him, see if he talks like Yoda does. But yeah, I think we are getting closer to that. And, he arrives on the planet and everything. Another thing I liked was him fighting these creatures called Alamites. I didn't love the look of those creatures, but I guess they were kind of native to Mandalore and everything like that. But Mando, unfortunately, is still no good at using the Darksaber, and it's still very heavy for him to wield and everything. And when they go down into the mines, Mando gets caught by some type of cyborg creature. I thought it was a pretty cool design, and everything. It was certainly different. And he gets captured, and then this is Grogu's episode. Grogu shines a lot in this episode because he has to save Mando's butt this time. And so he uses the Force to take out another Alamite, and then ends up flying back to where Bo-Katan is, so that she can go and help him save Mando. And as Bo-Katan and Grogu are getting into the atmosphere, and I really like the shot before too, when Mando and Grogu were entering the atmosphere for the first time through a storm and everything, which is really cool visuals. And then coming out of the storm and seeing that shot of Mandalore. This season for me already feels bigger in scope and scale than the previous seasons have. Because the volume can be limiting, but I don't know if they're finding ways to work around that or if they're, shooting somewhat differently, but it definitely feels bigger, which is cool. And there was a beautiful shot of one of the cities on Mandalore, Sundari, as Bo enters the atmosphere with Grogu too, that I thought was just a really, even though it's in ruins and everything, it was a very beautiful shot, good cinematography and everything. And while Mando isn't too great with the Darksaber yet, Bo-Katan is very skilled with it, and it was cool seeing her in action with the Darksaber. She could definitely teach Mando a few things and maybe train him on how to use it, though I don't know. We'll see what happens if she wants to do that. And then they eventually go down to the living waters, and Bo believes that there's nothing very special about the waters, and there's nothing magical that's going to happen, and she's just kind of entertaining Din at this point. And Mando steps into the waters, and he says the creed, just like the boy did in the first episode. That boy got cut off by that crocodile creature. Mando gets cut off at the end of the creed because it looked like, at first I thought he was dragged under the water by the mythosaur, but actually it seems like he stepped off a ledge and just sunk because of his armor. And Bo dives in there and saves him because she's wearing the jetpack still, and they see the mythosaur as they come up through the water there. So I guess my question is, well, it was very cool finally to see the mythosaur after we've heard from season 1 the legends of everything, and Mandalorian being able to tame the mythosaur and everything, and could Din Djarin be the new ruler of Mandalore? Is it going to be Bo-Katan? Is Bo-Katan going to feel differently about the legends and everything now that she's seen the mythosaur firsthand? I'll be curious to see episode 3. I think usually episode 3s are pretty big for the Mandalorian in the past couple seasons. I think, and I've heard rumors that this is going to be maybe one of the longest episodes, which I'm happy about. So yeah, looking forward to Wednesday night. But what did you guys think of the Mandalorian chapter 18, the Mines of Mandalore? But now we are going to head into the news for this week. And let's start with the box office report for this week. So we had Scream 6 was got off to a franchise best start with an estimated debut of $44.5 million. So it brought in, even more than expected, and topped the $34.7 million launch of Scream 3 way back in February of 2000. I haven't seen this movie yet. I'm not really into the Scream movies or much horror, but a lot of people are, and they definitely went out to see it in droves here. Um, and Creed 3 remained strong in its second weekend. It only dropped, let's see here, only was down 53.4% from its first weekend. It brought in another 27.17 million. And it's already getting close to passing the first Creed, which made, I think, 115 million domestically. So, this movie's making a lot of money, and it looks like they might go forward with this franchise, maybe just with Michael B. Jordan. We'll see what happens. So, just looking at kind of the box office from this week, domestically at least. Here were your top 11 films there. We had Scream at the top, followed by Creed 3, 65, getting some negative reviews. It brought in 12.3 million domestically. Ant-Man and the Wasp was down at number 4 this past weekend. And believe it or not, Avatar: The Way of Water still at number 8. So still in that top 10, pulling in money. So this weekend we have, I believe, Shazam is coming out. So we'll see what kind of competition that gives to Scream and Creed 3. But let's move over to the Academy Award winners from last night, the Oscars here. And I have to say, I didn't watch the whole thing, but what I saw of it, it seemed pretty tame compared to last year. And there, there wasn't, from what I saw, there wasn't the typical like get up on my soapbox and talk about this. There, a lot of the acceptance speeches were thanking people and were people being very humble, which I like to see. But again, I didn't see the whole thing. There were some, everything everywhere all at once was the big winner. It was nominated for 11 awards and it won 7 total, including Best Picture. So I was happy to see that, because this movie, while it's really weird and bizarre in parts, it kind of blew me away at the same time. It's an interesting concept, but I was very impressed with it, and somehow it works, even though there's a lot of really weird, bizarre things in it. But I was glad to see this one. Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert both won Best Director, and Michelle Yeoh won Best Actress for and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I thought she did a great job. It was great to see Ki Hai Kwan. I might have butchered his name. Winning for Best Supporting Actor. Of course, he was Data in The Goonies and Short Round in Indiana Jones. So it was great to see him win, and he just seems like an incredible guy. Jamie Lee Curtis actually won her first Oscar for Best Supporting Actress in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I was surprised to learn that was her first Oscar, actually. This movie also won for Best Original Screenplay. And there was another one as well. Let me scroll down and find that. It won for Best Film Editing as well. This was really one of the only films that had a lot of nominations that I actually watched. So I'm glad I chose to watch this one. But some of the other movies I watched and I was interested in, Avatar: The Way of Water got some love with Best Visual Effects, and well deserving. I mean, what they were able to do in terms of the visual effects, it just looked fantastic, and the underwater stuff was amazing. You can't deny the visual effects there. There was some love given to Wakanda Forever. for best costume design. Again, I didn't absolutely love this movie, but I did like it more the second time I watched it, and especially all the stuff with Chadwick Boseman and how they handled his loss and everything was great. Um, there was some love to Top Gun Maverick, which happened to be my favorite movie of the year. They won for best sound. So at least, and they were nominated for best picture as well. So I'm glad Top Gun got in there a little bit. Um, and those were the things that I was really most interested in, and the things that kind of stood out to me. But what were your thoughts on the Oscars this year? Also, Brendan Fraser won for Best Actor in The Whale, so he's kind of made a comeback here in his career. Um, but again, I don't know how much you guys care about the Oscars. Do you care about it at all, or were you at all excited about anything? Let me know in the comments section. And during the Oscars, we got a look at the Little Mermaid trailer, which debuted on Disney's YouTube channel as well, this live action version. Yeah, so I'm not really sure what to think about this. I think it was a pretty good trailer. I think it looks all right. My wife is a huge animation fan and loves the original. And she hasn't been a big fan of the live action adaptations of the classic Disney animated movies so far. We both enjoyed Aladdin probably the most out of all of them so far. But this one, the issue I have with this one here is just some of the casting choices are pretty interesting for me, just because we're used to what the characters look like in animated, and the characters don't look like that here. Even you know one of the characters was changed from a male to a female. Obviously, there are more diverse actors in these roles, which I think it's great to have diversity in different roles, but I feel like they're trying too hard to show diversity in their movies, just and making these characters like look nothing like they did in the animated movies. So I don't know. Maybe that's not a problem for a lot of people. I'm sure there's a lot of people who embrace that. Just from my point of view, it's just I'm kind of questioning that a little bit. But hopefully, I'll give this movie a chance and go see it, and it'll be good and everything. But I don't know. What do you guys think of the Little Mermaid trailer? And now is the time of the show where I am going to head into my review of The Last of Us Season 1 finale. So, The Last of Us Chapter 9 is called Look for the Light. And this was a shorter episode than I expected it to be. It only clocks in at 43 minutes, but I felt like they did a nice job of wrapping up the story and fitting it into this shorter runtime. And I didn't feel like it was too short or anything like that. But there were a lot of I think that overall this show has been so well done and such a strong adaptation. And there might be some things here and there that I questioned throughout, but I thought they did a great job here with the finale. And we have a cold open in the beginning of the episode with Ellie's mom, whose name is Anna, and she is actually played by Ashley Johnson, who was the voice and the actress that portrayed Ellie in the video games. So it was really cool to see and hear her, because her voice sounds just like Ellie, and so that was kind of cool, because it felt like, oh, Ellie is coming from this woman who looks and sounds like her. So in this episode, we see that Ellie was actually born as her mom was being bitten by an infected, and the umbilical cord was still connected at the time. So that might explain why Ellie is immune in some way. And we kind of get into that a little bit later in the episode. But it becomes clear in this flashback, in this cold open, that Marlene, who is the leader of the Fireflies, and Ellie's mom have known each other for their whole lives and are best friends and everything like that. And so as Anna is infected and knows she's going to be turning, she asks Marlene to take care of Ellie, or to keep her safe and everything. And according to the creators of the show, some of this information is going to be from the inside the episode and the podcast and everything. Marlene's decision, she thinks the safest place for Ellie to be is actually with Fedra, and that's how Ellie ends up growing up in the Fedra military school and everything like that. Um, so I thought this was a very nice cold open to go back to show Ellie's mom and get some insight into the immunity or the possibility of why she's immune. But then we jump into the present, but it's a month after the last episode, and Ellie is very quiet in the beginning of this episode. Normally she's the one that is, you know, cracking jokes and trying to ask Joel a bunch of questions. But here she's really quiet. And I think she's maybe still traumatized from killing David, what happened in the previous episode a month ago for her. Whereas Joel's actually the one who's talking a lot and even is joking around with her. Once talks about wanting to teach her to play the guitar and says he'll sing for her. He's trying to connect with her. He's feeling better now after his injury and infection and everything like that. And I think he's just trying to connect with who he sees now as his daughter, basically. And another thing I liked from this beginning part of the episode was how Joel boosted Ellie up, and then had her go to get the ladder, just like in the video game. That's something that happens a lot in the game. So I like that. I always like when there's those nods to the video game. And basically something that gets Ellie talking and gets her excited again is seeing a giraffe and feeding the giraffe and everything. It kind of brings a lighthearted moment into the episode. And then we get this view of like several giraffes and everything around Salt Lake City. And Joel for a moment looks at her and says, we don't have to do this. We don't have to continue on. There's risk involved. We could just go back to Tommy's. We could go back home. We could go back to Jackson. But Ellie is determined to see this through. And she says, it can't all be for nothing. Everything I've done can't be for nothing. We have to see this through, basically. But she says, after this is done, I'll follow you wherever you go, which I was just so like, I thought that was such a great line and a beautiful moment. Her saying, I'll follow you wherever you go. Like, we're in this together. And their relationship has really reached its potential here. So I really like that moment. And of course, after something good happens in this show, shortly thereafter, something bad happens. So the Fireflies find Ellie and Joel. They knock Joel out and take them to the hospital in Salt Lake City. And Joel wakes up, he comes to, and Marlene is there and tells Joel that they're prepping her for surgery. And he's like, what surgery? Because I don't think it entered Ellie's mind or Joel's mind the sacrifice that she would have to make to find a cure or to be able to use her for a cure. And basically, Marlene tells Joel that they have to do surgery on her brain to remove the cordyceps and try to replicate the results, because her cordyceps, the way they react with other cordyceps is they tell it seems like she's infected. In order to replicate that, they basically have to kill her. And Joel's like, no, that's not happening, and Joel is just at that point where he's going to do everything he can to protect Ellie at this point. He failed to protect his daughter Sarah. He failed to protect Tess. He is not going to fail to protect Ellie, and he just goes into fight mode and he kills everybody on his path between he and Ellie. And the interesting part of this scene is, I thought I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be like the big action scene. This is going to be like a big shootout and everything. So I was a little disappointed when the score took over and it was almost just you couldn't like hear much of what was happening. And he was just going through all these people. And the creators of the show explained that they didn't want this to be like some big action scene where they glamorized the violence and everything like that. They wanted it to be more of a sad thing and for the score to take over, because Joel was basically, in their words, he was burning his own soul to get to Ellie and to save Ellie. But just now that I'm talking about the score, I think the score is so well done in this show throughout the whole course of the show. The score is it tends to be a little bit more on the subtle side, but there's certain notes like those violin notes, that just bring you back to the game if you played the game like I did, and just there's a lot of moments with the score just feels like I'm back in the game and everything like that. Joel basically saves Ellie and gets her out of there. He even, kills the doctor that was about to perform surgery on her. And Marlene makes one last plea with Joel, like, okay, you can still make this right. We can still save all these people. You just have to let Ellie do this. What do you think she would want you to do? And he kills Marlene too. He's like, he knows that she will mount forces and come after her again. So he just eliminates her. That's all he can see right now is just saving Ellie. So when Ellie wakes up, Joel basically lies to her and says that there are many more immune people like her out there, and but the cure hasn't worked, and they stopped trying. They were just running tests on her blood, but knew it wouldn't work. And I don't know if Ellie fully trusts that explanation or not, but Joel's basically, lying to her to save her pretty much. And he told Marlene that it shouldn't be Marlene's choice what happens basically, but at the same time he's making it his choice. He's by withholding the truth from Ellie. She doesn't get to choose really what to do. He does. So I can't say I wouldn't do the same thing as Joel if I were, in that position, because I am a father. I have a daughter. I would probably stop at nothing to save her in this situation, especially if they were going to do some kind of surgery on her that would kill her that I didn't have a say in or that she didn't have a say in. So yeah, I can't say that I wouldn't do the same thing. I don't know. I think when you're a parent, it just changes things. And you think about things in a different way. And this is that age old argument about, is it worth sacrificing one life to save thousands, potentially millions of others? And different people might have different ways of looking at this. And I know this has been a kind of a controversial ending for 10 years now, the way the video game ended. So Joel, it looks like, takes Ellie back to Jackson, and he finally tells Ellie about Sarah, and Ellie tells him about the first person that she shot and killed, and that was Riley, who she had to kill because she was infected. And she makes him swear that what he said about the Fireflies was true at the end of the episode, and he says he swears it was true. So I'm curious to see what will end up happening if and likely when she finds out the truth. But listening to watching the inside the episode and listening to the podcast, there were some more insights here. Craig Mason and Neil Druckmann talking about how this story is about the beautiful and dark sides of love, what love can cause you to do, how it can be a beautiful thing, but how it can lead to even violence and death. Joel told Ellie the true story of how he got his scar in this episode, that he attempted to actually kill himself, but he flinched and missed. And so Ellie now knows the truth about Joel, and he was being vulnerable with her, which is what she really wanted, from him and everything. They also said the easiest choice that Joel's made in his whole life is saving Ellie over the whole world, because she is now his whole world. And so that was an easy choice for him. And they pointed out that just when Joel and Ellie are becoming completely honest with each other, he lies to her in the end to protect her. And so that trust is going to be broken. And I guess the question is, how will she react to this when she discovers the truth? I know how she reacts to this because I started playing The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know if it'll be identical, but I know how she reacts to this. I'm curious to see how the show handles it. And another interesting point was that Ellie was basically born into violence. In the beginning of the episode, we see she's born into it, and it might be why she's obsessed with violence. because she was kind of born into it and born into this violent world. And a quote that Craig Mason said that I thought was really interesting is, loving people tends to trump simple morality. So when people are so in love with somebody, or they love somebody so much, it can be even hard for them to make simple moral decisions and what might be clear choices to other people. So that's part of this episode too. And Neil Druckmann shared that they would run play tests for the game and everything like that. And they would ask people what they thought about Joel's decision. And what they found was, if they weren't a parent, then it would be like 50-50 what they thought of Joel's decision. But if they were a parent, then they 100% agreed with Joel's decision, which, is kind of what I said about myself earlier. And so I thought that was interesting. And yeah, that basically brings us to the end of The Last of Us season 1 and my reviews of The Last of Us. I think overall they did a tremendous job of adapting this to be faithful to the game, but also to make some other choices for different reasons, whether you agree or disagree with them. But I think this is the best adaptation of a game into a show or a movie that I've seen. Again, I'm curious to see what happens in season 2, and there's some news regarding season 2. The Last of Us Part 2 will be split up into multiple seasons on HBO. So that's pretty interesting, because The Last of Us Part 2 is about twice the length of The Last of Us Part 1. And speaking with GQ, Craig Mason said that there was no way it was going to be just one season, and that more than one season is factually correct. And Neil Druckmann also followed up on that and said that it will be more than one season. Some of the things that he's looking forward to in part 2 are the changes that they've discussed and seeing the story come to life again in this other version. And I think it's exciting because it leans into those feelings you had from the game really heavily in a new way. And Craig Mason says, I think we know what we're doing on this one. I'm not saying that in a snarky way. I'm saying that in a hopeful way. There are going to be things that are going to be different, and there are things that are going to be identical. There are things that are going to be added and enriched. There are some things that are going to be flipped. Our goal remains the same as the first season: deliver a show that makes fans happy. So I gotta say that I didn't love some of the things that happened in The Last of Us Part 2, the game. So I'm curious to see what happens. I never finished the game, which I really need to do. I need to finish The Last of Us Part 2, especially after seeing season 1 and everything. I'm curious to see if my opinion on it changes, but I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody that doesn't want to know what might happen going into season 2. But I don't know how I feel about it. Part of me really wants to see it, and another part of me knows what happens, at least in the video game, and I'm kind of torn, because there's something that happens that I just completely hated and disagreed with. But yeah, what did you guys think of The Last of Us season 1? The Last of Us seasons 2 and 3 will be on the horizon, because we're definitely going to get more than one season for The Last of Us Part 2 video game, and I don't know if there's going to be a third part for the video games, or more seasons than just 3 total, but we will see. Again, I haven't seen what happens at the end of The Last of Us Part 2, but again, what are your thoughts on this show? Let me know in the comments section. And that is all for The Last of Us season 1. Well, thank you everybody once again for joining me on the weekly POV. It has been great once again. I've really enjoyed reviewing The Last of Us, and I'm excited about this week's episode of The Mandalorian. And if you are looking for me on socials, you of course can find From a Certain Point of View on the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to From a Certain Point of View. You can find us on Twitter at Certain POV Pod. And we are a proud member of the Red 5 Network, which you can find on red5network.com and on Twitter at Red 5 Network. So much great content there, and so many, many kind people doing what they love to do. So make sure you check them out. And until next time, everything I said today was true from a certain point of view.